अर्चित,
बोलिए।
आज ना बड़ा जोर से गाना आ रहा है, बहुत जोर से।
रुकिए रुकिए, कान बंद करने दीजिए।
हाँ, कान नहीं, कान दिल सबके पर्दे वर्दे खोल लीजिए और लंगोट को टाइट कर लीजिए, बिकॉज गाना है वो सुना मैसूर से आई वो दिल का करार ले गई, ऐसी था ना कुछ।
I mean, you
वो
can
लोग
insert literally any city in that and it will make sense.
हम सिंगल लोगों का मजाक ना उड़ाया जाए। अभी हम ऐसे change.org पिटिशन फाइल करने वाले हैं कि सिंगल भारतीय सिंगल मुक्ति मोर्चा, हमें हम बहुत मुक्त हैं, हमें थोड़ी सी कोई तो कैद कर लो। So yeah, so that's a beautiful song. I don't know if you know this or not.
I don't. But you mentioned Mysore, and that's a hint into what we will be talking about today and who we'll be talking to today. Today we have Vinay with us, Vinay Parameswarappa, who's the founder of Gully Tours. And Gully Tours organizes food tours in Mysore, Bangalore, and a few other cities. He's also been featured on Netflix and a few other television series where he's featured Mysore's culinary heritage. Really happy to have you on the show, Vinay.
Thanks, Archit. Thanks, Sadaf. Great to be here. And I must say, you guys are doing a fantastic job in this
Thank you.
podcast. Like I said, we have a lot of people on Instagram putting up great pictures of food, but very few people who go behind the scenes and do all these connections and the stories behind it. So, great job, guys. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Vinay. Thank you. तो Vinay, you are from the same शहर ना, वो वडियाल्स वाले, हैदर अली, टीपू सुल्तान वाला, the same city?
Wait, yeah. The royal and the regal.
Oh, so do you have this royal blood as well? Like कुछ royalty नहीं है थोड़ा हमारे मुंह पे royalty मारने के लिए?
यार बहुत ढूंढा यार, there's no blue. There's only red. Sometimes
Only
some
red.
black marks.
अर्चित, रॉयल्टी का तो पता नहीं, मेरे पास ग्रीन टी है, अगर चाहिए तो मैं मार सकता हूँ तुम्हारे पे।
नहीं, आज ग्रीन टी नहीं, आज कॉफी की बात करेंगे because Mysore. And we'll come to it in the second part of the show. But I think first you want to start off with you, Vinay. How does an engineering graduate start something as eclectic as food tours? So tell us influences from your life, your childhood, your teenage years that led you on this unique journey.
Sure, Ajit. If you look at any Bangalorean or South Indian, that's how life starts. You're an engineer, and then you become whatever else you want to be, right? But you're right in terms of our influences. I was listening to one of your podcasts where you talked about your love for coffee came because of your father. And he was very widely traveled and how he got a cappuccino machine.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, right? For a lot of us was growing up. So I grew up in Bangalore and I went to a KV, Kendriya Vidyalaya. And our classmates were from around the country, right? So your lunch break was literally food from the country. In fact, Abhinandan was my classmate, the fighter pilot. And his mom was a great cook, fantastic cook. And we used to have this sharing of lunch during the lunch break. But if the food was so good, the teacher's still teaching in the first hour and we can smell good food because somebody already whacked the lunchbox from his bag without him even knowing. And they're all eating food, right? So I think that's my first experience, in school, where people from across the country were there and having, you're trying to taste different kinds of food. It's an appreciation. It's also where I grew up. I grew up in what is called the NAS campus, the National Aerospace Labs, right? So that was this massive 400, 500 acre campus. And again, people from across the country there, right? So you had this this little labor from Bengal, and she would make these dishes. The lady downstairs was from Bangalore. The family upstairs was from Kerala. And, you always had this exchange of food, right? So somebody came and gave you the little dish that they made, and then you never give a dish back empty, right? You'd always fill it up with what you made at home. So I think very early on, I really got to experience a lot of food from across the country, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So I think that's why I would say it is more liking than all the finer aspects. I think that is as we spend more summers on this planet. That's what we acquire. But initially, just that love. Your tiffin is the same. Your lunchbox is the same because that's what you're having at home. But then what your neighbor or your friend gives you is very exotic, right? And similarly, what is ordinary for you is very exotic for the other person. And so that's my beginning of appreciating food from across the country.
Lovely. I remember in my school, we also started eating before the lunch break. And my method was that take the tiffin under the desk, have a bite,
Yeah.
and then sit like this and pretend to focus while, chewing the bite. Sadaf, have you done any whack stuff in school with respect to your tiffin?
I was just laughing at both of you because yes, similar to that. Okay, here's the thing, and many of us already know about this, and this is Vinay for you as well. The reason why I went to school was to eat food. I did not. I mean, actually, no kid actually go to school to study. If somebody is saying that, oh, मैं तो पढ़ने गया था, it's just lying. Okay, nobody goes to study. At least the initial 1 or 2 years. I went to eat food. Anyway, when it comes to the eating food and eating lunch and tiffin, right? I used to do the same thing, what Archit is saying, and what you said. In the middle of the like maybe lunch used to be like after the 5th period, right? And then but bhook lag jati thi third or fourth period tak. So then we will sort of whack somebody's lunch out. And same what Archit saying, but we never like bend down to sort of eat and then cover the mouth. Teachers always used to turn to the board, na? So the moment they turn to the board, they write something, we'll just like grab a bite and then just cover the mouth. However, here's what we used to do, and this is why I think the CBSE board is really badnaam, because that's what they do. What we used to do is if you are asking someone, right, hey, listen, share your food as well now, and he or she, not mostly he will not share the food, then of course you will get mad at him. So what would you do? You just smack the dhakkan, and then dhakkan will fall on the ground, and then it will make noise. The teacher will turn around and then punish that kid. I'm like, देखो, simple सा है. You did not share the food, right? So because you did not share the food, खाने की शिद्दत देख रहे हो? We always used to do. And there was this other guy, his mother used to make Maggie. वो भी बिल्कुल तड़का वड़का डाल के, तड़का हल्दी हींग का तड़का जाता था उस मैगी में. And people who have eaten Maggie, they know कि डब्बे में ना Maggie is like water. It takes the shape of the box. तो ऐसे clumpy सा आता था. That's why I never liked Maggie, by the way. I still don't like Maggie, for people who are going to hate me for that, but I still don't like Maggie. So yeah, that is my tiffin story.
Interesting. I also remember, like, the ones who'd get good food, by the time it was lunch break, their box was empty because everybody would have fought for it. And I remember it was lunch break, and you would be like, biting our nails because the food is already over. Kha liya humne. So what do you do?
So tell me one thing, then what would be an ideal lunchbox for you, like a tiffin when you're in school? What would be a Bangalorean tiffin would be?
That's a very good question. Right? So for me, I always had, growing up, love for wheat. So I love chapatis, I love puris. And no matter what my mom made for breakfast, etc., I should always make chapatis for me separately, because that's something I enjoy. Right? And it's also some dishes, especially South Indian dishes like a dosa or a idli, I don't enjoy when it's cold. And I do feel South Indian food is best when served hot.
Yeah.
Right? It's not so with a lot of North Indian dishes, right? Like, say, for example, you can have a nice aloo paratha. Even when it's cold, it's nice and soft and fluffy, and you can still enjoy it. But I can never have a cold dosa. So my tiffin will never be a dosa. It'll never be an idli because I've never finished it. So it'll be chapatis. In fact, a rice roti, what we call akki roti, is another delicacy. So we have that with different kinds of sabjis. Even I think different rice dishes. Right? It could be like a lemon rice or a tamarind rice or what we call a bisi bele bag. So what you see in our tiffins is all a variation of different rice kind of dishes or rice-based preparation, right? And something you can enjoy when it's cold.
Nice, yeah. And Archit, I know you were a Gaplu kid when you were. What was your lunchbox like? Aloo paranthe, pakka North Indian ka hoga.
No, it was mostly sandwiches. But I was, the grass is always greener on the other side. I was never interested in my own tiffin. I was always interested in my friends' tiffins. And, actually the worst tiffins were those which had Maggie. And I mean, I used to like Maggie back then, but if people, like if you get Maggie in your tiffin, it becomes this mold and takes the shape of the box. So it's like, it becomes like a cake. So you have to like cut it with a knife or cut it with a fork and then eat it like it's an idli. So that was, in retrospect, unpleasant.
True. And I remember this classmate of ours, that's finished. And every day his lunch were 4 slices of bread and a plum cake and a bit of jam. And all of us would fight for the plum cake, and that's it. And maybe that's why I still don't enjoy sandwiches. That was his lunch every day, right? And this is really the stopper and very focused guy. But yeah, so everybody's lunchbox, I think, had a story to tell, right?
Yeah.
I think this lunchbox has a story, which is what a lazy mother or father. All right. So from the food tour of the past,
Sorry, before we jump on to the next topic, I noticed this pattern, and maybe it's just a pattern in my school. I noticed that people who had working mothers or both parents were working, their tiffin was relatively fast food bent, and people who had one parent cooking at home, usually the mother, they had a slightly more elaborate tiffin.
Yeah, it's interesting. Archit says this. In fact, growing up, I like Maggie, and my mom, of course, is a homemaker, and she put a lot of effort to make sure that your lunchbox is nutritious. And you don't appreciate it back then.
Yeah.
It's only much later in life, when I am in college or in university, I'm like, damn it, I wish I had this nutritious food. Why am I having Maggie? And when growing up, I was like, crave Maggie. So you're right. The effort that they just put so that you have nutritious food. And I feel for the working mothers because they're really trying to manage, right? Work life and cooking that meal. So yeah, I hear you.
Also, just for the record, इतनी मैगी के बारे में बात करने के लिए मैगी या फिर नेस्ले ने हमें कोई पैसा नहीं दिया है, फ्री की प्रमोशन है. But of course, if they wish to give us some money, we would not reject it. Just saying. पैसे दे दो, पैसे की तो हमें तो दिवाली भी आने वाली है. तो from a tour of memory lane, let's come back to food tour. Right now, I am aware of Delhi food tour and Delhi food tour scene. Then I'm also aware of Mumbai food tour scene, but I have never been on any of the Bangalore food tour. So, but tell me, or tell both of us or everybody, what happens in a food tour in Bangalore, and how did you get the idea from your foreign visit as well?
Sure, Sadaf. So a couple of things happened, right? So growing up, we also got to travel across the country. My dad used to work for the government. So every 4 years, you had LTC, leave travel, something. And we really got to travel across the country. So again, you're really trying to get food from across different places. And I remember this one particular visit. We were in Delhi and then into Shimla. I just love these little stations where they're making puri right there on the platform, hot puri, great sabji, and it's fantastic, right? And once we got to Shimla, I remember there was a little, the only restaurant on Mall Road, you had to walk down. And they had made idli and dosa, and it was almost showcased. And my sister wanted to try it, and I remember she telling me it was so bad. And I think that is my earliest memory, saying that when you're traveling somewhere, you want to try the local food, right? Though you might want to, you have feelings for food from home, right? The reason I say this is because this greatly impacted me. When I got to travel a lot across the country growing up, after your engineering, I ended up in a tech job in Bangalore. And I think after a few years in tech, you're shipped away somewhere. And I was in Singapore. Singapore was a great place. I was 20 something in a new place. The great thing about Singapore is it has a lot of fantastic culinary influences from the Chinese, from the Malay, from the Indians. It's almost like a melting pot. And if you look at Singapore, they have these fantastic the street food, and you have the food courts and the roti prata and all of it. Right? Very very interesting food, and it moves very quickly, and it's not very expensive, right? So that was very interesting. And during the same time, I really got to travel a lot across Southeast Asia. So a couple of things hit me. So one, the travel and food is so strongly interlinked, right? Because I think any place you go, if you just dissect what's on your plate, it'll give you, pictures of the culture and etc. etc. So while I was doing that in Singapore, I happened to go on a chance walking tour there. This was in the Chinatown district. That's so cool. You do these walking tours. That was that was the first walking tour I was doing. So not only you're getting to know about the place, but you're getting into these small shop and you're trying to taste some sweet meat and all of it, etc. It's such an insight into a culture. It's such an insight into a city, into a country, right? So that walking tour really changed my life. I wasn't enjoying my job as a techie. So at the end of the tour, I told the lady, you know what, I think I'm going to go back and start something like this back in Mysore. And she thought I was drunk. So that's what I did. So I was young and stupid back then. I tell them now I'm only stupid. The way difference है. So I came back to Mysore. This is by then I think my parents had moved to Mysore from Bangalore. This is 2009. What was interesting for me on a walking tour is it appeals to me on travel, on trivia, and on people, right? So that was my first experience as a walking tour, and I said, yeah, Singapore has 30 years of history. We have 5,000. Singapore is less than half of Bangalore, and look at our country, and we have so much to offer here. Yet Singapore gets more tourists in the whole of India. And we are history even today. They get 18 million tourists, and we get 10 million. So with that idea boiling in my head, so I came back in 2009 and I quit my job. I said, yeah, ho gaya enough. And I had some savings, having been there I worked there for a while. Then I said, why don't we do this walking tour in Mysore? And it was a foolhardy idea. We were about 2 or 3 people in the country doing it back then. So when I started to do these walking tours, I realized if you're just telling people the story of a city, it's on one level. But you're able to include food in your walk. It's a huge draw. It's a huge draw because some people might like history, some people culture, some people, architecture, art. But everybody loves good food. Everybody, right? And everybody loves good humor, right? So those are two things that went in common. So when we started experimenting, and that's when from the first walking tour that we started in Mysore, today we probably do about 50 or different tours. Every tour has a food element. Right, so that's how. So the tour that we do is called the Best of Mysore, where you're doing the story of the city, and then it doubles up as a food tour, right from the Mysore Pak to the Mysore Masala Dosa, and you're going to all these little hole in the wall places, right? And what you're really focusing on is good food. So that's why I think the intermingling of travel and food to discover a place came about, right? So this started in 2009. We started doing this in Mysore and slowly in other cities like Bangalore, Kurd, and Kochi, right? So that's where I think the interest came about. So that.
Wow.
My LinkedIn research stalking led me to see that you also you also went for an MBA. How did that influence or change your journey to do these food tours? I mean, your parents must be wondering, hey, finally he's doing something conventional. Maybe he'll get a consulting investment banking job. But then you came back and you expanded the tour business.
पैसा बर्बाद कर दिया मेरा.
You're so right when you say this, yeah, because my father has 4 degrees and he's the principal of a school. He was. And when I quit my job to do these tours, and he was so mind-blowing, saying, what are you doing? And he always introduced me to his friends saying, this is my son. He used to be a software engineer. I'm like, what do you mean used to be a software engineer? So for the first 4 years when I ran the venture, it was to do this in Mysore. I absolutely enjoyed it, right? Because like I said, this is ticking off all my passion areas in terms of, like, say, people, travel, trivia, food. And plus it was sustainable. So it was not just me and then there was a small team and all of it, right? The thing is, what does a confused engineer do in India? He either does a startup or he goes to B school. I did both, right? So after my first experience of doing this in 2009, I started this for 4 years. I grew this in Mysore. It's a good, viable, sustainable business. Then I hit a roadblock. I said, yeah, okay, I was able to do this in Mysore. What next? I didn't have an answer. And that's when a couple of my friends were in B school. I said, why don't you think of a B school? I definitely did not want to do this in other cities because in my head, I was able to do this in Mysore because I enjoyed it and I was there all of it, right? And I didn't see how can you do this in other cities. So actually, you know what? I had a good team. And So when I went to B school, the team still continued running the business. In fact, they did much better when I left. Looks like I was the bottleneck, is what I tell people. So when I went to UK, B school is an interesting experience, especially when you have run a business for 4 years and then you go to B school. It's a very interesting experience because you realize all the mistakes you've done. There are mistakes in marketing, mistakes in hiring, mistakes in operations, etc. And I think it also expands your mind a little, right? I think you're just meeting people from different backgrounds and all of it. And I was also very particular that after my MBA, I want to work in UK for a while. And I worked in two startups. One was called Yachtsy, which is an Airbnb for yachts, and the other was Neighborly, which is a social media platform for social good. But what this experience really helped me was, along with all my travels across Europe, because I said, the reasons I said I'm going to Europe, not to US, to B school is because, yeah, you can travel, right? You can really travel across the continent. Like Sadaf was saying, you go to school because you want to have lunch. You go to B school because you want to travel, not because you want to study. And the daru, of course, right?
Of course.
So we also see in Europe, very interestingly, you see brands such as, also a confession. Every time I travel, the first thing I do in a destination, I do a walking tour, right? No matter where, from Southeast Asia to Europe to wherever I've gone. Because you land there, and the first few hours when you're doing a walking tour, it gives you a great orientation of the city, right? In terms of all of it, the history, culture, blah, blah, blah. And also the person leading the tour will give you a bunch of recommendations. And funnily, I've met a lot of people who tell me this. The first thing I do when I go to a city is I do a walking tour for two reasons, right? So one, a lot of the people leading these tours are fairly interesting characters. They're offbeat characters. And also the people who sign up on this walking tour are not are people who want to know more, right? So you're meeting an interesting host and you're also meeting interesting people in the walking tour, because after the walking tour, a lot of you, excuse me, will end up in a cafe or a pub having a drink, right? So that is a very interesting experience. I've done this everywhere. I've done this in Paris, in Berlin, in Rome, Florence, everywhere, right? Across Southeast Asia. And there I observed a couple like Sandeman, right? That's a walking tour company in 18 cities, or Fat Bike Tour. They're in a bunch of cities in Europe. And also Grasshopper Tours in Southeast Asia. They've been able to successfully expand, right? And I think that got me interested. And in fact, my B school, uh, my project in the final year was how do you scale a walking tour, right? How do you scale a tours business, right? And that was my project. And after working for a couple of years, I said, what, copy ho gaya, enough, let's come back. And I came back to India. For your question, yeah, after B school, everybody has this booth. Yeah, hockey stake, whatever stake. Yeah, you got to take funding, you got to get the investors, you got to grow this. And even I had that booth, whatever got picked up by one of the incubators, etc. And my idea was, yeah, you want to have more tours in the country. So can you look at something like an Etsy in the US? What is an Etsy? Where you're a creative person, you don't want to put up on Amazon. So here is Etsy, which is a boutique place to put up your creations. And Etsy also supports you in terms of, let's say, picking up some of those skills, fine-tuning it, helping you with everything that's needed to make your business sustainable. I said, yeah, this is a fantastic idea. So why aren't I doing this in India? So we even piloted this. It was called Gulliver, where we said, anybody who has an idea for doing any tours, please come to us. We'll help you create these tours, and we'll help you market these tours, and you only have to go and deliver. But now that taught me a couple of things. One, the skills required to create a tour and the skills required to deliver a tour are very different. And very few people have both of them in common. Right? And two, I figured we're still not there yet. As a country where, if you look at Europe, where every student there is doing walking tours. Right? So I think we still are not there yet in terms of the number of travelers and number of people who want to lead tours. But what came out of this was a very interesting experience, because we created an academy for Gully Tours where people who are coming in can get skilled to lead these tours. And we use that in Gully Tours.
Fantastic.
So we ran an academy where anybody from a student to a retired school teacher and anybody in between can come in, and there's a series of whatever I would say it's informal interviews, but once we pick them, we I would training is a very harsh word. It's more of an unlearning experience, right? And how do you connect with a person? How do you tell a story? How do you use your voice? Uh, in terms of how do you hold somebody's attention? All of it, right? All of it. And with this training, what was important was you want to keep the person's personality the way it is. And the reasons people enjoy these walking tours is because you're not this other guide in the monument who's going on rattling. You're going because the person has character. So how do you keep his character but standardize on a bunch of things? And that was a great learning. And we had fantastic people. They have absolutely no background in the city, but they're very passionate about people, right? And they want to connect with people. And so if you see, even now, we're one of the top rated top companies in the country, right? And that was a model that worked. So, and then I had the realization, yeah, okay, now we can scale. So from Mysore, we took it to Bangalore. From Bangalore, we took it to Coorg. From Coorg, we took it to Kochi. So that's the crux of it, right? So it's the people. So to answer your question, that whole experience helped me understand the process behind the scenes. You can run a one-person walking tour anywhere in the planet, right? But to run this as a sustainable business requires some bit of, I think, maturity and forethought. And so yes, maybe that is what that random randu into a B school helped me with, at least directly or indirectly. And if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Interesting. As they say, no knowledge goes waste. ऐसे कुछ बोलते हैं ना. So from
नहीं भी बोलते
engineering,
होंगे, आपने बोल दिया, it's enough.
अब तो बोल दिया, अब देख लो भाई.
Yeah.
So engineer to MBA to so pulling all these sort of knowledge together in running an amazing Gully Tours. We have a lot more things to ask, to learn and unlearn, लेकिन थोड़ा ब्रेक भी लेना बनता है. थक जाते हैं बातें करते करते लोग, तो करते हैं एक छोटा सा टाइनी सा ब्रेक करते हैं. ऑल राइट है जी, वापस ब्रेक के बाद मिल चुके हैं हम. और अभी तो बहुत सारी बातें बाकी हैं. अभी तो एक अध्याय, one chapter is over. We are towards next chapter, which is about Mysore. And in fact, just to show off, people who were following me on Instagram and Twitter, they must have realized that I was in Mysore. Actually, I was crossing Mysore, but I was there. And it was beautiful. We made like a tiny short video of Mysore Palace. And then while I was basically heading to Uti, and then so you have to cross Mysore and then you have to come back again. But when we were coming back to Mysore, I asked my friends to go in the city and not just outside. So we explored the inside city as well. So I personally absolutely loved Mysore. I also picked up Mysore Pak from Guru. And I will come to that as well later. And I absolutely love that. That man was really hilarious and funny. So that I brought as well with me. But before we talk about Mysore Pak, which is essential because Mysore and Mysore Pak, why not? I want to understand what else is there. Like, what makes Mysore city very unique, apart from city being supremely clean. It's spectacularly clean. I was like, what is this? Where are we? So tell us why city is so clean. What is so unique about the food in Mysore that people should and must visit?
It's an interesting observations. I think when you're going to Mysore the first time, right? The cleanliness, of course, hits you, and the food. But the background to all of it is clearly the royal family. If you read Ram Guha, he says most kings in India were busy with wine, women, or wealth, or off to Europe at a drop of a hat. It was a few, and he talks about two, right? One is the Maharaja of Baroda, and the other is the Maharaja of Mysore. But they did fantastic things for the city, right? And one can go on and on. So I would say a lot of it goes back to the royal family, and especially in the late 1890s, when we had this queen called Vani Vilasa and her son Krishna Rajawadiya, on whom the famous KRS Dam was built. So it was really that 30, 40 years in Mysore's history that you really saw it transform, right? But when you're talking about history, there are two influences to Mysore, right? So one is the whole Wadiyar, the Hindu rulers who ruled for the last 400 years. You have that. But you also had Hyder and Tipu for about 40, 50 years in the 1700s. So if you see, you don't have too much of a Muslim influence in this region, because I also believe Hyder and Tipu were busy fighting battles all their life. So I think there are a lot of they did not have a lot of time on hand, I'm guessing, for food and appreciation, right? On the other hand, once the British took over, and which is why I'm sure you guys talk about this, I love Raja Rasoi, because that program really gets the crux of it, royalty. Because you had these 500 odd kings who were not fighting wars, right? Which means you were on your gaddi and you were safe. So then I think that's when all the culinary interests came. You go to all these places. And a lot of places, I think, to please the royal family, and I think that's what you would find in Mysore as well, right? Thanks to the royal family, we see a lot of the culinary variety, and the most famous being the Mysore Pak. Right? Everybody from Mysore enjoys the Mysore Pak. In fact, the person from whom you bought the Mysore Pak Guru's feet, his great grandfather was a royal chef in the Maharaja's palace. His name was Kakasura Matappa. And in one of his experiments with basin, ghee, and sugar, came a dish which the king absolutely enjoyed. And it was called the Mysore Pak, right? And what is so interesting is even today, his three brothers who run the shop, and I love it. The youngest comes in the morning at 6:30, opens the shop, and the one in the middle comes in the afternoon, and the oldest comes in the evening, right? And trust me, when you try Mysore Pak, it's hot and it literally melts in your mouth. Literally melts in your mouth.
It does.
And Mysore Pak when it's cold is a different story. Right? It becomes very hard and all of it. That's why I say you put it in the microwave for a couple of seconds because the ghee has to melt. And then you try the pak. Right? So it's a funny coincidence that they're also a distant family related because my uncle who's more really spent a lot of time growing up in their house because the old man in Gully Tours was a great philanthropist, right? And he would love to entertain people, especially my uncle had come to Mysore to study. And he loved kids who study and they would go there every weekend because there would be a feast. So imagine if you have such a great chef, okay, getting these kids every weekend for a feast. And I'm sure you can imagine how good the other dishes would be. But the point I'm making here is a lot of it was tradition, right? So it was his great grandfather who started it, and today, it's the fourth generation still making this, right? And they're not looked at. No, I'll open 5 more shops, 10 more shops. No, and that's maybe another Mysorean thing, right? They're very content. They do very well in that particular shop, and they're also very content, right? So that's another Mysore thread that you would find. People in Mysore are very content. I mean, a lot of people still think, no, the king's rolling, right? Yeah, life's good. In fact, even a lot of terminology. If you spend some time in Mysore, everybody will say coffee aita, which in Kannada means have you had coffee? And the best part is you will see this throughout the day, morning, afternoon, evening. It's a byline for how are you. Instead of saying how you say coffee aita. So imagine in a city, which is so laid back and it's got a lovely character. So I would say a lot of it goes back to the royal family.
I have a technical question on Mysore Pak. Is there a jaggery version of Mysore Pak available? And was that the original version, or what is the original version made with, say, white sugar?
In fact, the two versions that we find distinctly, one is with dalda, which is much, much harder, right? And that's actually, it's not very pleasurable to have.
Yeah.
The other version is actually with pure ghee. And that is an absolute delicacy, right? So it's more than the jaggery, it's a difference in what you use. It's dalda or ghee. And the one made with ghee, and of course you have I think somebody's making Horlicks Mysore Pak and chocolate Mysore Pak. So of course you'll have variations of that sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're having the Mysore Pak, Guru sweets, and if it's so they make it at their home even today, right? Which is like 5 minutes. This thing, and they bring it here. You can actually see it being made at their home, and it's still in charcoal. Right? They're still making that sweet, right? So I think those does make a difference, right? And that fresh hot Mysore Pak, it just melts in the mouth, right? So so watch out for that.
I have a question, Archit. Again, people who are following us on Instagram or Twitter must have noticed Archit Puri's most loved tweet. Trending. Archit was viral when I sent him food. Archit, the question is, you also had some yellowish thing that I sent you, right?
Yeah. So for context, Sadaf sent me lovely food over this weekend. There was biryani. There was something called mutton kalia and besan halwa. So you know, the first feedback that my mother gave after seeing that besan halwa, she's like, this reminds me of Mysore Pak.
So how was the taste? First, I want to know that.
It was very close to Mysore Pak, then to Besan Halwa. And I figured because you've recently been to Mysore, that might be the reason for it. And I know the taste of Mysore Pak because one of my aunts lives in Mysore. So whenever she comes from there, she gets big boxes of it.
So the reason of asking that question is because the thing that you had wasn't by Besan Halwa, wasn't made by me. It was from Guru's and it was Mysore Pak.
Oh,
Nice.
So yeah, so you had a taste of well, not taste of Guru, but a taste of Guru's Mysore Pak. And what Vinay is saying, it's spectacularly beautiful when he gives you the fresh thing. And also, I was reading somewhere before I reached the city that if you behave nicely with him, he will have this big, like ear to ear smile, and he will just welcome you wholeheartedly. He did. I behaved nicely with him. I came in line. Anybody who was cutting the line, he was like, "Excuse me, line mein jaiye." Now, the funniest was I asked him. I didn't know his name. Then we started the conversation, and that's when he told me about coal and everything. I just went and I asked him how is Mysore Pak, and he was like, "बहुत अच्छा है." And I was like, "अरे अच्छा ही होगा." I meant price कितने का है? Also very cheap. Just for people to understand, it's not unlike the other parts of the country where you can get like a kg of Mysore Pak for like $600-700, and which will have less ghee. This one was swimming in ghee, and for what, $400 for the kg, 480 rupees a kg, with so much of ghee. So I loved Mysore Pak, and I think people who are in Mysore Pak, we will have a Vinay's recommendation letter later. But if you are in Bangalore, you must visit to Guru's and have his Mysore Pak and behave nicely.
Yeah.
He also has halwa, by the way. He also has a halwa. That day I had pumpkin halwa. He said, I keep on changing depending on whatever vegetables I get in the morning. I change the halwa and I make it out of it.
So Sadaf, is very interesting. You talk about, sometimes he's friendly, sometimes he's not. The fact is, of the three brothers, one of the brothers is a very nice guy, a little strict because they get so many of these guests, right? Sorry, these customers, and not everybody, everybody was like him. And one of the brothers is extremely sweet, right? So I think what you're seeing is you have an interaction with the brothers. He's always smiling and he's in such a great mood and all of it. And the other person, he says, behave and all of it, right? So you're also seeing that. But yeah, you know how crowded that place gets, so it's not easy to.
Yeah, you also used to, because I looked at two shops. There was the one shop which was hole in the wall, and then right next to it was a bigger shop. When I was looking up, I realized that they had a bigger shop, but maybe because of pandemic, they now shrunk into the small hole in the wall thing with long queue.
So you're right, Sadaf. In fact, the shop was much bigger, just adjoining, was much bigger. But it was even much before the pandemic. I think from the last 10, 12 years we've been doing the tour, they've come down to that small shop, and that's how they operate, right? Very, very old school. Just focus on good Mysore Pak.
One more technical question, and I don't know if there is an answer to this. Is there a particular kind of ghee that is used in the Mysore Pak at the popular places? Like, is it cow ghee? And cow ghee is also the multiple ways of making cow ghee, or is it buffalo ghee?
That's a very good question. And I would be curious to find out as well. But it's generally, a lot of these is desi ghee, right? So it'll be from the butter, the milk, the butter, and I think they would have their preferred vendors too. So they would make their ghee, is how I would look at it. It should not be something that
my guesswork would be that they don't use the very popular one. At least this is popular north, which is danedar ghee. So I don't think they use danedar ghee because your texture of the basin is already danedar, so you don't need extra. And also because danedar is heavier than the regular ghee, so I'm assuming it's just the regular ghee. And also in the words of the guy who served me Mysore Pak, in his words, what ghee should we use? Acha wala.
That's all that matters at the end of the day.
Acha wala.
That's all that matters. Yeah.
But there's an interesting distinction. My bet would be mostly cow ghee, right? It'd be from cow milk. I don't. My take. I don't know because it was buffalo ghee. Yeah, that's my take. But yeah, that's something for us to find out.
Yeah, I will.
Next time somebody's in Guru Sweets, we should ask him.
Sure.
Fantastic. We also have to talk about two other important dishes, one of them is a dish, one of them is a beverage in Mysore.
Sure. That also we had on the way. So yeah. But even before that, what is how is Mysore food different to Bangalore? And apart from Mysore Masala Dosa, we'll come to that later. But how are they different?
That's a very good question. And I don't think there's a lot of difference because Mysore was the erstwhile Mysore kingdom, right? And Bangalore is a part of the erstwhile Mysore kingdom, which really consists of 60-70% of the present Karnataka state. So you don't see a lot of difference between, let's say, the cuisine in Bangalore and Mysore per se. But in the erstwhile Mysore kingdom, Cool was a part of the erstwhile Mysore kingdom. The cuisine is very different. Mangalore was a part of the Mysore kingdom, very different. Or Malnar, where Chikmagalur and all that region, that was very different. So you have variations there, but per se, Mysore and Bangalore, not very.
Nice.
Of course, a lot more finer details in Mysore because, like I said, Bangalore today is a big city, fast-moving city, etc. Right? So you see a lot more the fast food style of like the darshanis, right? And if you come to Bangalore, that's very interesting. You find darshanis, and what's a darshani? Darshani is you go in there, you pay, whether you want a dosa, idli, whatever, right? Any South Indian dish, you get it. It's an open kitchen. You give him the little recipe, and he serves it to you, and you stand, you finish your meal, and you walk away. And surprisingly, I haven't come across these darshanis anywhere else in the country. Forget the state, anywhere else in the country. And that really got my attention. I'm like, yeah, this is very unique. Right? Bangalore is filled with them. Many Bangalore tell you, it's a great place. The food is inexpensive, it's fast, it's good, and it's a moving thing. And then I was fascinated. In the 70s, there was this person, his name is, if I'm not wrong, Prabhakar, who goes to, he's a proper character. He's running this fair price shops and all of it. And he goes to Singapore. And there he goes to a restaurant where you can see the menu there behind the cash counter, pay for it, get the coupon, and give it an open kitchen, and they serve you the dish. And he was mesmerized, right? And that inspired him to come and start the darshani. This is nothing but the same concept, but for Indian food. But I'm curious. I'm going to ask you guys this question. Any guesses which restaurant in Singapore did you visit in the 70s? Which is the same concept. You're seeing a menu, you're paying for it.
Naivedyam.
McDonald's.
Sagaratna. McDonald's. Oh wow.
McDonald's.
Oh wow.
This is the McDonald's concept. It's the same. Just that here it's good real food, and there it's McDonald's. Right?
Interesting.
So and that's fascinating. Huh? That's fascinating. So the next time you're in Bangalore, watch that. In fact, I spoke to his son for one of my tours. I want to do research, and I spoke to them because that man really created this whole enterprise of people who really run this fledgling darshanis, and it's a great thing to watch. The operations.
Is darshani a concept or the name of the restaurant?
That's another very good question. So in fact, the first concept that came about had the name darshani in it. I think it was called Ganesh Darshani. So now that's a slang, like how we use Xerox or a photocopy machine, right? Yeah. So now all those kinds of where you pay beforehand, you get it from an open kitchen, and you finish standing and walk away. That concept is called a darshani. Right?
Oh, because I am just now thinking two restaurants in Bangalore. And people who go in Bangalore will be able to confirm this as well. And if you have not, you should go to Bangalore and visit these two places. One is the Filter Coffee, which is in Gourmands, I believe, and second one is MTR's, which is also opposite Filter Coffee. And I'm assuming they have similar concept. Of course, you're not taking the token and bill and giving it to the kitchen, but very fast moving. You sit. The moment you sit, you will get a banana leaf. They will come. They will ask you what you want, and then they will write on a paper. Your food will come. You did not even start eating. They give you the bill, and that's about it. You eat, you get up, and you pay at the counter. You don't get any other bill. You pay at the counter while leaving, and then 30 minutes and sorted. Both of these restaurants jam-packed. So I'm just thinking that are they also darshani concept, or they have something else?
So if it's a post-paid, then it's not a darshani.
Okay.
Right? If it's a prepaid, right? then it's a darshan. So what you actually see is the MTR model, right? So
Yeah.
MTR was marvelly different rooms. So if you actually looked at it, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, you got a lot of this different room concept. You also have another Mahalakshmi different room, and that was exactly. So you sat down, and whatever you wanted to serve to you, and you quickly finished it, and you walked up, you paid, and you moved on, right? That is the old version. The new version is the darshan. And again, what you're fascinated with these places is, like I said, how quick the operations are, right? Like what you're ordering, how is it going back into the kitchen, how it's coming in, because they also certain dishes that are served only at certain times of the day. You can't order whatever you want at any time. Between whatever 9 to 11, 12, they have these breakfast dishes, and then they have the lunch dishes. So that's another way of streamlining operations at the back, right? So they're very, very smart. I think this whole South Indian fast food industry is a fantastic case study in operations, right? I was once chatting to this person who runs Udupi Park, a very popular. Uh, in one of his restaurants, he said there are 90 people working behind the scenes, 90. And I'm like, wow. And if you just see the efficiency in which they do it, right? Also with the price lines, they're not very expensive, right? So they're making their margins and volumes. So yeah, so it's a treat to watch.
Wow.
To observe.
Yeah. Beautiful. So before I jump into the Mysore dosa, actually let's start with Mysore dosa only. What is so unique about Mysore dosa? Any dosa, Mysore masala, Mysore dosa, or as compared to the normal ones like Bangalore.
Yeah.
And I want to add one thing for us ignorant North Indians. Whenever we go to say Sagar or Sarvana Bhavan, which are popular dosa joints here, when we order Mysore dosa, or just add the Mysore word to any dosa, it means that you have that extra red chutney on the dosa. That is all. So please, shed some more light on uniqueness of Mysore dosa.
Yeah, of course, this comes up a lot, right? So
Yeah.
how the Mysore Masala Dosa different? I think it's different because it's one of the best dosas on the planet, right? So I think that's it. It's a great dosa. So we're getting to the technical aspect of the dosa. What is distinctive about the Mysore style of dosa? There's two things, right? So one, it's the red chutney paste that's made on it,
Yeah.
which is generally garlic, onions, and all of it. That gives it a very distinct flavor. And if you look at the potato sabji, the aloo ki sabji inside, right? So there's not too many things going on, because I remember once having this in Delhi and they had carrots and capsicum and whatnot. That doesn't go into Mysore masala dosa, right? In the sabji, it's largely potato, maybe sometimes a little bit of peas and onions and all of it, and that has maybe a little bit of salt, right? There's not too much going on in that. Right? So that's what makes the Mysore masala different. And in some places it's oil, in a lot of places it's ghee that really elevates the ghee, right? Lots of ghee, and that's when you get that crisp brown, that crispy dosa. Right? So actually, three things: the red chutney, the potato mashing. Also, if you see in places like Tamil Nadu, they really mash the potato filling, right? It's almost like how you do for a vada pav, right? You're really beating the whole thing in the pan. That's not what happens in the masala dosa. You gently put it on like a dollar, and you finish up your dosa, because you're not trying to it's not a paste, right? And then a lot of ghee. So I think those are the three distinct factors of masala dosa. And the fourth factor is it has to taste good. It's not a masala dosa in my opinion, right?
And is there a difference in the chutney and a sambar as well?
Another very good question, right? So if you go to a lot of these traditional hole in the wall places, it's only chutney, right? They give you only chutney for a lot of reasons, right? Practicality, you're standing and eating, it's a hot dosa and a chutney, and what you can use, and a liquid, a frothy liquid is actually a pain, right? Than an accompaniment. So that's practicality. But historically, if you also see, sambar came to South India only in the 1700s. That's Sambhaji, that was Shivaji's brother, and that's the amti, which is what is had in Maharashtra, which is like a dal lentil with all the sabji, right? So if you see also, sambar has come into South India in the last 200 years, right? But idli dosa go back 2000 years. I mean, our great man K.T. Achaya, the whole concept of fermented food goes back 2000 years, right? Nishido's idli So you have idlis, which is steamed, and then you'll have chutney with it, right? And what does chutney have? It's coconut. Again, coconut is for eons, right? What is Kerala? Kerala, the whole name comes from coconut tree, right?
Yeah.
So you have rice that is grown in this region, right? Which is fundamental to the south of India, that is fermented. And then you have coconut. So those are the two staples of South India, and you're making your dishes with it. So sambar is a much later addition. It's a nice to have, but a lot of these, like I said, hole in the wall authentic dishes, if you get a great chutney, you're done. You don't need the sambar, right?
I am about all chutney.
Yeah,
A
same.
Yeah,
couple of
exactly.
I think idli and dosa tastes better with chutney. Of course, sambar hai to it's like nice to have. Nahi hai to bhi koi farak nahi padta hai.
So, in fact, because you asked Sadaf, I love. There's nothing like a great dosa. For me, my ideal day is a great masala dosa in the morning and biryani in the afternoon, and I'm like, I'm the happiest man, right? In fact, there's a tour that we run in Bangalore called Death by Dosa. So all Bangaloreans relate to, which is our most famous ice cream growing up from corner house is called Death by Chocolate. Just like how people in North India associate to Narulas
Yeah.
for your ice cream, in Bangalore, South India, it's the corner house, right? So Death by Chocolate is
Yeah.
what all of us have eaten. It's
Hmm.
cool. So we said, let's have a play on that. And it was called Death by Dosa, and which is amazing with the restaurant. We're always fully booked. And we go into the oldest part of the city and we go to three great dosa joints, right? Three great dosa joints. And I jokingly tell people it's three dosas for three of your arteries, right? And the doctor is on call on emergency. But what you see on that dosa tour is even in these three old establishments, hole in the wall, but their dosas are so different because their technique, right, in terms of how much they're fermenting, what they're adding is not just rice and gurad, right? I'm sure they'll have their little mixture and how the chutney is with them, right? So it's fantastic. And we're just doing this tour in the old part and tasting these dosas. So this is my theory. So every time before the tour, I ask the guest saying, which is your favorite dosa? And it's always funny, I find people from Tamil Nadu saying, "Oh, my best dosa was in Chennai," or somebody says the best dosa is in Kerala, and I disagree, and I tell you two reasons why I disagree. If you see, dosa is fermented batter, and I believe from my experience. So, like I said, my wife's like I said, a trained chef, so I would like to back it up from what her take from a chef's angle. For the rice to ferment, the temperature has to be right. And I feel the right temperature you get is in Bangalore, Mysore, and max to Hassan. It's a stretch because after you're going down the Western Ghats, you're going into Bangalore. And if you're going a little up north, it's Davangere. Davangere's Benne dosa are very popular. It is in this triangle that you get the best dosas, in my opinion. It's just like champagne. Champagne has been grapes grown in a certain region, right? And that's
Yeah.
what makes dosa interesting and different. On the other hand, for me, the batter in Chennai or the batter in Kerala is not fermented enough, right? And which is why I don't get that, what I think is the ideal dosa. But then I realize people's association of a great dosa is what they've grown up eating.
Yeah.
Just to add to it, my sister lives in San Francisco and she's a great cook. And her complaint is her consistency in the texture of dosas are not great. Right? Why? Because exactly it's the temperature that you're dealing with. So that's why I feel this triangle of Bangalore, Mysore, Hassan, you go, this is almost like a straight line. And you go a little up, Davangere. And it is that triangle, and yeah, you get the best fermentation and you're getting the best dosas. If you go into the coast, because you'll get great fish in the coast, right? You'll not get great fish in Bangalore. So, which is why I think, the local produce. In fact, Shobha Narayan has written a very interesting book on temple foods.
Yeah.
And she really talks about how, if you look at temple foods in different places, is different. It's also because it's a background of the kind of rice grown in that region. There are hundreds of varieties of rice. So if you also see, that's also what's happening with dosa, because you're using the dosa rice, and it'll be in the local variety that's grown. Which is why Davangere, which is about 4-5 hours from Bangalore, the Davangere Benne dosa has a totally different texture, right? Compared to the dosa that you probably say having in Mysore, right? Or even there's a place called Mulbag, right? It's about an hour from Bangalore. The dosas there is slightly different. Why? Because the rice varieties in the region would have been different, right?
Yeah.
And hence the dosa.
Fantastic. So one question before we jump onto coffee is which place has the best dosa in Mysore? according to you?
Oof. I think the jury is still out on that. The best dosa. Um, Let me talk about a couple of my favorites, right? So an all-time favorite is Mailari. Um, it's another hole in the wall. It's the fluffy kind of dosa, right? It's the smaller, fluffier, a lot of ghee, a lot of butter, and
Yeah.
his chutney. I feel chutney makes a big difference, right? And his chutney is just iconic. Iconic.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've never had that kind of chutney anywhere else. So I think Mailari, a lot of imitations of the Mailari out there. So Mailari is a very good dosa. Um, you also have another hole in the wall. It's called Dosa Point. It's also on our tour. That's where we finish off our tour. Again, fantastic dosa. In fact, we have guests from Bangalore coming and say this is one of the best dosa we have. Again, just everything that's going on, the amount of ghee that goes in, just don't watch it when he's putting the ghee on the dosa because it's like completely, like I said, it's going to your arteries everywhere. But this is good fact. Right? So dosa
Yeah.
points are a good place. None of these new ones. Ramya used to be a very good hotel. It's closed down because of Corona. GPR is another one, but I don't enjoy that as much. But I would say really Manali and Dosa Point.
Got it.
And a lot of these street food vendors, you have a lot of street food in Mysore. So that's these two places you should try, Malari and Dosa Point. Both dosas are very different. Malari is a very fluffy, soft dosa, right? And even his filling is very different.
Yeah.
It hardly has any aloo in it. I think he has a lot going on with onions, etc. It's a green paste, right?
My kind of dosa.
Whereas those, yeah, exactly. And Dosa Point, on the other hand, he has the potato filling and all of it, but this is consistency, and I think how he gets it's crispy on the outside but soft on the inside, right? So when we do these tours, let's say we've been doing this tour for the last 12 years, we've had more than 30,000 people, a lot of them international, right? We've never had a single person with a stomach upset, not a single person with a stomach upset, but nobody's come back to us. Generally, people have a stomach upset, they write to you saying, what the hell, where did you take us? I'm amazed. People from across the world have tried dosa and they love it because the amount of ghee and it's done right. What's hitting you is not it's not the chili, etc. Right? You're getting it right. So I think that's the universal appeal of good food.
Lovely. Let's finally come to coffee, and I have two questions about coffee. One, there is a type of coffee bean called Mysore Nuggets. So tell us why it's called Mysore Nuggets. And my second question is, which place has the best filter coffee in Mysore? I occasionally order from this place called Gayatri Coffee Works. They courier coffee to Gurgaon, and I make it in my own machine. But I want to hear it from you. Which is the best place to get coffee?
Oof. So again, this is very tricky.
Yeah.
I feel every self-respecting South Indian will not start his day without coffee, right? Without coffee. If you look at my dad, he's a teetotaler, doesn't eat meat, all of it, right? No voices, but coffee. Without his coffee in the morning, he will not even function. And like if you read R.K. Narayan's works, R.K. was so particular about his coffee, his filter coffee. In fact, people in his house would tremble. So we do a tour called the Malgudi tour.
Lovely.
And so I had the good chance of meeting R.K. Lakshman, and a lot of people I met in Mysore, R.K. is good friends, right? And they all talk about R.K.'s love for coffee or something else, right? And again, this is very, very South Indian. And that right amount of frothiness and the right amount of sugar and the milk and all of it, everything that goes in. It's almost like an experiment. And I'll tell you why this is almost an experiment. A good friend of mine, classmate of mine from college, moved to the West Coast. He was out there, and he loved his filter coffee so much that not only did he get the filter from India, the coffee beans from India, and try to recreate the coffee, but it's never the same. For him, it was the milk, right? So where I'm coming to is all of them matter, right? You're getting the right coffee. And when you said Mysore Nuggets Extra Bold is the best variety of coffee out there, right? It's a variety of coffee, right? And how the coffee bean is roasted, what is the grind size that is roasted in, and like they use either thick buffalo milk or it's cow's milk, using the right kind of milk and with the right amount of sugar. So getting that right is an absolute art, right? So I go on it because my wife is a fifth generation coffee planter. So they grow and they sell coffee. So the tough part is I can't take on a coffee date because they are so finicky about their coffee. It's amazing, right? So to answer the question, um, I have a favorite in Mysore. It's called the Mysore Refreshments. I like his coffee. I like his coffee because also right next to the zoo, so you can park your car, you're having a cup of coffee, you see the giraffes walk by and all of it. So I just love that experience of it. But then you also realize pure coffee. See, chicory, like you guys mentioned in your previous, it's a byproduct. Second World War, there was shortage of coffee, so they put chicory, which is the root of another plant. So chicory is an adulterant and adds bitterness and body to coffee. But the joy of pure filter coffee is you're using a lot more coffee powder, but the flavor that you're getting is amazing. And this is all my learning, like I said, thanks to my wife's family. They use the same coffee powder, but it's brewed differently. Of course, we're used to a filter coffee, great. Let's say if you're doing an AeroPress or a French press or you're doing a pour over, coffee tastes so different. And I think that's when it's such a fascinating beverage. It's the world's most traded commodity after oil, right?
Yeah.
And the more you go on about coffee, so much of our lingo comes from coffee. Tips to ensure prompt service comes from coffee houses um, uh, in the Middle East. In fact, it's also lovely, right? Coffee comes from the Middle East, right? And the Sufi saints, and it was their high because they can't have alcohol, right? Like one of my profs in Greek would say, "We're all on drugs, just different kinds."
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's so true.
Yeah.
All of us need something to lift us up, right?
True.
So if you've seen the Middle East, because liquor is banned, and how coffee really becomes this beverage, right? And how from the Middle East has traveled to India. And who is drinking coffee in South India? The Brahmins. Again, it's no alcohol, right? It's the coffee. You're getting your kick, right? Something to stimulate your mind. So I do feel for filter coffee, the Master Refreshments does a good job. And also a lot of the darshanis do coffee. Of course, there's a bit of chicory that gets into it. But just if you that's something that I must confess. After I've gotten married, I've learned to do um, a good filter coffee at home. So right from, like I said, getting the so we grind coffee at home. So getting the grind size right, making sure the decoction is right, and also at what point when the milk is boiling, and then you add your coffee and the right amount of sugar, and then you get it right. It's a lot of joy. So I would say for all of us, it's almost like a ritual. So there are two things. So I do a pour over in the morning and I enjoy it. And I love having a filter coffee in the evening. No matter where I am, I have to get my filter coffee. So I would say when you start doing your filter coffees at home, and you start getting it right, I think that's your go-to, right? That's your go-to. If not, the good thing with South India is, especially places like Bangalore, when you travel around, you get the filter coffee as well. But even thanks to a change like, I mean, you're talking about cafe coffees in the last 20 years or all
Yeah.
blue tokas, etc. It's so funny. We talk about micro roasting as this new rage, right? Oh, they're roasting their beans. My grandmother did that. She came from Chikmagalur. Our grandmother, you know what they do? They'd wake up and they would roast their coffee every day. They would have a big pan filled with sand, and in that they would put the coffee beans. And there's a reason why it's sand, because it evenly roasts the coffee.
Yeah.
Right. And then you took the coffee beans out, and every old house in Chikmagalur had a grinder, right? And you grind, and you're getting the grind, and then you're getting fresh buffalo milk or cow milk, and then you're making a coffee. And um, they're also so conscious, right? That sometimes use jaggery. So use jaggery for coffee. So even they use it, not just processed sugar. So just imagine what they did. Like, what's microbrewery or a micro roastery today? If you go to Ladakh, they're making their wine. No? They're doing it for generations.
Yeah.
You don't need a cool bearded guy to tell you that no, this is the way to have it. Right? So similarly, I think with coffee, this has been a tradition, right? Like I said, you go back a few generations. Uh, even like my wife tells me, growing up, her mother would always roast coffee. They had a little roasting machine. They'd always roast coffee. So all her neighbors would stop and say, "My God, what's this aroma? Can we try some coffee at home?" So even today, you don't need a fancy grinder. My mother-in-law put it in a mixer, and she'd always tell me, get a rave consistency, which is like semolina. Get that
Yeah.
consistency with coffee, right? And
Yeah.
then put it into your filter, right? So, like I said, so coffee is very dear to all of us. In fact, I must say, during the harvest season from November to March, one weekend, the whole family gets together and we host what is called a specialty coffee trail. So right from the bean all the way to the cup, You stay on the estate for 2 days and you go through the journey, and that's when you realize the amount of hard work that goes behind an estate, right? It's crazy, and all that processing that goes through, and to get your cup of coffee is like I said, it's a great way to appreciate this beverage. And like you said, if you're having a great masala dosa and that fantastic filter coffee, your day's done. What a start! You watch it off with the right coffee, and it's not me. You go back generations, we will tell you the same thing.
You've talked about coffee so much, and also you mentioned a cool bearded guy. So I am the cool bearded guy, I think, self-proclaimed, and I would like to tell you guys that French press and South Indian filter coffee are the best coffees in the world. जाओ, take it or leave it. Haters जो है अब आ जाए और प्यार वाले तो आ ही जाए. Okay, अच्छा तो I just want to quick thing before we get into our last segment, underrated and overrated. You mentioned, and both of us are coffee, actually all three of us are coffee lovers here. You mentioned that your wife is a 5th generation coffee planter. If she sells coffee, please let us know. I would like to buy coffee. I was in Bangalore and I got coffee supply as well. So, I personally love buying coffees from the smaller ones. I think there's more love there than commercialization. So I personally prefer that.
In fact, yeah, of course. They sell it in Blue Tokai. It's called the Harley Estate Coffee. It's also in Third Way. In fact, they were the first ones to introduce whiskey barrel coffee. So where the coffee beans were, so they have a coffee scientist on the lab. So they, you put the coffee beans in Amrit whiskey barrels. So when it comes out, like always say, it's smells like whiskey but tastes like coffee. It's a lot of experiments. They did rum barrel coffee. It's called classic coffee. So you can also order it off.
And classic. I've had. I didn't know. Okay, now of course. Also for coffee lovers, if they haven't had that whiskey flavored or whiskey barrel, I think Devi does a beautiful whiskey barrel coffee. And Mumbai may, I think there's another Quinona. Yes, Mumbai has this Quinona brand. They also do beautiful whiskey barrel coffee. It also has a nice subtle aftertaste of whiskey.
Exactly.
I just opened up Harley Estate's Amazon page, and I found that interestingly their notes of guava, pineapple, and green apple. Fascinating. I'm looking forward to trying it. Sorry, I interrupted you.
It's so interesting you mentioned this. I didn't know. So both this lockdown and last lockdown, we happened to be on the estate and we spent 2 months there. And that's when I learned so much about coffee. And my father was telling me there are a lot of jackfruit trees there, right? So which is why during the pollination, the bees go to the jackfruit tree, then come to the coffee plant. So they get a tinge of jackfruit. But their uncle's estate has a lot of sapota trees. So their coffee gets a tinge of sapota. And I was so fascinated, by how the ecology plays a role, right? In terms of the flavors that you're getting. Because every time you're in the coffee lab, I must confess, though I love food, I'm not blessed with the skill sets to taste all the different notes. So you'll be in the coffee lab and they'll be saying, Goa, lucky. I'm like, I researched so good or it's bad, right? But the more you train yourself, the reason you start enjoying black coffee is you really start to get all the little flavors in it, right? And I must also confess, we as Indians, I'll give you a little example. So when I was 24 and I went to work in Singapore, I remember getting off the flight in a taxi. I was famished, went to the hotel and he said, okay, buffet breakfast. I flooded my plate with Chinese food and one bite and I couldn't take it. That's when I realized what I was enjoying was Indian Chinese with curry patta and all our masala. Right? And we Indians, we love the taste of spices. Like gajar ka halwa, there's less gajar but more sugar and everything else. Not just the taste of gajar. And it's the same thing what we do with beverages, whether it's a single malt with Coke or etc. Then you realize the joy in all of them is just have it by itself, right? Whether it's tea or coffee or whiskey, any of these beverages. And it's an acquired taste. It will take you a while, right? And I mean, I'm no purist. People should have it the way they like it. But the reason I see people getting so deep into, let's say, a coffee or a tea or a whiskey is because when you're having it in its purest form. I had a classmate in B school who came from Nicaragua and he got Nicaraguan rum. It's one of the best rums in the world. It's made from sugarcane. And I was trying to mix something with him. He said, no, Vinay, you don't mix it. It's one of the best rums on the planet. Just taste it. Right? So I said, yeah. So that's when I realized, I think with beverages around the world, taste it for what they are. and you really get it's like Alice in Wonderland. You will go deeper and deeper.
ऑलराइट, तो हमने इतनी गप्पे मार ली हैं कॉफी की, डोसा की, पता नहीं मैसूर पाक की, पता नहीं दुनिया जहान की बातें. अब कंट्रोवर्शियल स्टफ. एक्चुअली 2-3 कंट्रोवर्शियल स्टफ तो हमने पहले बात कर ली है. आखिरी कंट्रोवर्शियल स्टफ, अंडररेटेड एंड ओवररेटेड फूड. we can do Mysore and Bangalore both. What is one most underrated food and what is one most overrated food?
That's a very good and a very controversial question, and I'm sure I'll face a lot of brickbat for it, right? We're looking at underrated food, right? Now, sometimes I feel some of the best dishes that we have in any of the cities that we go to, regions that we go to, is not found in restaurants, right? It's not found, it's always made at home. So if you look at this region, Bangalore and Mysore, the akki roti, right, which is nothing but a rice roti, is such a fantastic dish. Like when you go to the estate, they make a fluffy, hot akki roti, the dollop of butter, and just chutney. And what a fulfilling meal. Or like my mom, she would make akki roti with bangan. It's called yangayal. What a fantastic preparation. Or even with meat, this akki roti with some recently we just had with pork. It's a fantastic combination, even chicken curry, right? Because that dish goes so well. It really blows my mind on multiple levels, right? And because rice is fairly, I would say, bland compared to wheat, so you're getting more from the accompaniment, right? Whether it's the chutney or the bangan or the pork, etc. So I think that's hugely underrated. It's made very often in homes in this region. But I wish people are traveling. I will, like let's say, if Sadaf was in this region, I wish you really got to taste that. That is such an underrated dish. I really wish we get to see more of that. So that's an underrated food that I would.
In fact, I was in Chikmagalur 2018 and I was staying at this B&B, and there the host basically, the lady, the wife of the whole place, not the wife of the whole place, but the husband, the guy, wife तो husband की होगी ना, खैर तो slip of tongue हो गया है, घबराने का नहीं है. So tongue of slip हो गया. So she taught me akki roti. And abhi, when I was in Bangalore, another friend of mine made patri, which is a Kerala, I think, Kerala equivalent, a little fatter than akki. And I absolutely love it. I think it is underrated, totally.
Yeah. In fact, while you're talking about it, it's also like little combinations. We have puri separately, we have keema separately, but puri and keema, or in this region, what they say, puri and mutton chops. Oh, it's a heavenly combination. I just can't stop. So I come from a vegetarian family, right? But I really enjoy meat. So my wife's family, they're meat eaters. So I'm like a carnivore here. So all my life, I only had meat outside, right? Whether it's some restaurant, etc. And all my friends are Muslim, never made biryani at home. I don't know why. Maybe I was unlucky with friends there. So thankfully, I think with my wife's family, of course, they enjoy meat. And now is when post-marriage, I'm really getting to enjoy homemade meat dishes, and it's a world of difference, right? From the selection of meat and all of it, there's so much. So things like puri and mutton chops, or puri and keema, kaima, blows my mind.
And what's your overrated as well?
Oof, that is a long list.
Just
I
one.
think internationally.
Let's not piss off everybody.
Okay, let's. A good point. You're right, but I think I'll again. I think get a lot of people against me for this. There's a dish in the region called churmuri, just like jalmuri in West Bengal or bhelpuri. There, it's puffed rice and it's grated carrots and onions and peanuts, etc. For some reason, I don't take the dish. Like I have friends in Boston and London, they go crazy. They come back, amount of this churmuri they want to have, and they take it in these boxes. Again, my wife loves it, and she tells me, "You haven't had it in the right place, maybe." But I just feel, that's a little overrated for me. But people just love it in the region, right? So churmuri is like I already have people coming against me. There's a very, very popular blog post in the region called churmuri.blogpost.com. It's a fantastic blog. But yeah, churmuri is.
Is this the dish that you're talking about, which you get with the pani puri guys?
Yeah. So in fact, the churmuri guy is just a churmuri by itself. They don't do any other. They don't do pani puris, all that.
Oh, okay.
Other charts. They only do churmuri and a bunch of these other things with it, right? Something called nippat, which is like a flat, spicy bit, right? So they do something called nippat masala and all of it, right? So it's very local chakna, very local snack, right? And very traditional, right? What they use. The little things like they'll do a cucumber slice and he'll put these masala peanuts and he'll put puff fries on that. And, it's a very, very interesting, healthy as well snack. But for some reason, I think I'm a little biased to things with gravy. So I don't know. I really don't take that. Yeah. So that's my.
A quick thing on that, because something called churmur is a popular delicacy in Bihar, Jharkhand, and Bengal. And that's why I asked that. So the churmur in Bihar, Bengal, Jharkhand is different because you get it on Pani Puri guy or the Golgappa, whatever you want to call it. What he will do is chop the boiled potato and top it up with the puri. So just mash it and then top it up with puri, imli chutney, kala chana, onion, and then mix it with spices, right? So that's a churmur. But the time I was having Bangalore mein abhi churmuri, I didn't like it either. Because it wasn't the same. There was too much gravy, too much, and like gajar kyun hai iske andar? You had gajar. I'm like, please. I'm like, churmur is churmur.
This is a very simple dish where it's just puffed rice, a bit of onions, a little bit of carrot, with peanuts, coriander, and lime.
Achha.
Right, and some bit of oil, and he really mixes the whole thing up, right? Yeah. So for me,
different one.
It's a little too dry. So that's not very good.
Fantastic. Sadaf, I think this has been absolutely lovely.
I know.
We can shut our shop now. But before we do that, Vinay, we want to ask you, for our listeners, where can we find you on social media?
Sure, Chit. Gully.Tours on Instagram. Just find us there. Also find us on YouTube. Just trying to put out content there. Just come to our website, Gully.Tours as well. So yeah, I think Instagram is probably the best place.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of
fantastic. And that's we can book tours through Instagram and your website. Is that right?
Yes. Both Instagram and on our website. And you'll see food really hovering around a lot of our tours.
Beautiful. We will have all these in the show links as well, so people can directly click and then go to all these social media, or the social media से आके विनय का शोषण कर सकते हैं. On that happy note, दुकान करते हैं बंद और कॉफी पी लो यार जाके, बहुत कॉफी घी, ये दो चीजों की बहुत बात हुई है. So we'll have some ghee in the coffee.
Fantastic. I'm hungry already. I'm going for a little tooth extraction after this. I don't think so I can have good food for the next couple of days, but what a joy. And like I said, great work, guys. Please keep bringing these stories from across the country. We have such a food rich country.
Thank you. So